Tavis Smiley is back with us. Tavis, how are you? Good to see you.
Hey, Sean, how are you?
Do you have any evidence that you can present to this audience at all that either Ferguson or Eric Garner's death was rooted in any way, shape, matter, or form in racism? Anything you can present on that, or do you believe?
I can tell you three things. Number one, race is still the most intractable issue in this country.
I didn't ask you that.
I'm answering the question the way I choose to answer it. Number one, respectfully, racism is still the most intractable issue in this country.
Okay.
It's a part of everything we do still. Number two, too often black men, I know this personally, even as a host on national television, as black men, too often we're seen as the boogeyman, and the presumption of guilt is always made toward us as opposed to being presumed innocent, number two. And number three, the clip you played earlier from Mayor de Blasio is right, that when too many parents in this country in 2014 still have to have the talk with their black sons for how to save and protect their own lives, something is amiss, Sean.
Right. We have two very different cases. You still haven't answered my question. I'm asking in these two cases, wait a minute. There are protests, Tavis, going on all over the country. People saying, hands up, don't shoot, I can't breathe. Two very different cases here. And I'm asking if you have any evidence at all you can give our audience on the issue of this being race-related, and you haven't given our audience one specific thing in this case, or either case, have you?
I was not in Ferguson with Mr. Brown, nor was I in New York with Mr. Garner. What I can tell you is that for 50 years of my life, I've been black every one of those years, and I know what it's like to try to navigate life in this country as an African-American man. That's what I'm saying.
All right, and I am particularly angry at the Eric Garner death. If you listen to the rest of Mrs. Garner's comments, Tavis, she talks about, oh, they used to make fun of him, call him the cigarette man, and call me, oh, there's Mrs. Cigarette Man, etc., which tells me this was about a city and a state obsessed with getting every penny they can out of the high-tax cigarettes that they have in New York, which was $6 a pack. But that's a different case. He should not have died, this man. He shouldn't have been confronted. He shouldn't have been known by the police. That, to me, is more fundamental than and a lot of your arguments I would agree with, but there's no race examples here. Here's the tough conversation I want to have with you, though.
In this regard, go ahead.
Because we watch all these protests. We've sent our cameras out. We asked the protesters, what do they know about the case? Did they read the evidence that was presented to the grand jury? They didn't. I'll do it now. Because in the case of Michael Brown, there's a lesson to be learned. Don't rob a store. Don't intimidate a clerk. Don't fight a cop for his gun. Don't charge at him like a football player with his head down. Let's go to the eyewitnesses in the case, most of which happen to be black. From the grand jury testimony, I could say for sure that Brown never put his hands up after he did his body gesture.
I'm
going to finish and then I'll give you the floor. He ran towards the officer full charge. Witness number 30. I've heard lots of people talking about how Brown had his hands up. He did not have his hands up. Witness number 40. The big kid turned around, had his arms out with an attitude. The cop just stood there. Dang, if that kid didn't start running right at the cop like a football player with his head down. And one last one. This is witness number 48. The dude turned back around, started charging towards the police officer. The police officer told him to stop at least 3 times, and the boy wouldn't stop. Now, that doesn't sound like a narrative that has been bought by a lot of people. Hands up, don't shoot. So the narrative that's being advanced in this country right now is predicated on a lie, isn't it?
I've been patient. This is your show, obviously, and I'm delighted to be on once again with you.
You have the floor.
But I hope you'll give me as much time as you took to read those comments. Number one, with regard to Mr. Brown, when you hear Officer Wilson in his testimony refer to him as a demon and describe him in the way that he did, we go back to my earlier point, Sean, that too often black men are already presumed guilty, and that officers, not all, but too many, come at us with an approach that already raises the level of tension before you get to the unfortunate and untimely death of Mr. Brown in Ferguson. It's the way that we are viewed too often from Jump Street, number one. Number two, with regard to the Eric Garner case, even if for the sake of argument, I'm not going to do this, but if for the sake of argument I granted out everything you've just said about Michael Brown, how in the case of Eric Garner, Sean Hannity, my friend, do you have an officer doing something, a technique, a chokehold that is unlawful? A chokehold
that is not unlawful either. It's not policy. There's a difference. It's not. You're wrong.
I hear the difference. It's against department policy. I get it. That's the bottom line.
That's right.
Whatever you want, you're splitting terms here. Whatever you want to call it, it was against New York Police Department policy. But it wasn't a chokehold either. It was a headlock. To apply that. It was against policy, Sean.
No.
You're splitting hairs, my friend.
No, I'm not. There's a very distinct difference.
Sean, call it a headlock. I grant you that. Call it a headlock. It's against department policy, number one. It is against policy, Sean. Not. It was an unarmed man. Let me finish. An unarmed man, number two. Number three, caught on videotape. So much for body cameras. And number four, the coroner says it's a homicide, and you still want to invite me on this show to argue with me about the fact that Eric Garner is dead? Are you serious?
You obviously,
are you serious?
No, you need to listen to me because you aren't hearing me. So let me educate you, because what I said is the police the police had no business being near this guy and arresting him 9 times in his life, because the greedy city and the greedy government in New York were arresting him over selling untaxed cigarettes. That is madness to me. Number one. Number two, whether you like it or not, when he's moving his hands around and saying don't do, he resisted. I grant you he did not deserve the force in that case. There is a distinction. I only pointed out because that's what the grand jury heard.
But Sean, let me finish this.
I want the grand jury evidence released so that we can hear what they heard about chokeholds and headlocks.
You read the entire transcript. I heard it. Here's the point I'm making.
Oh, that was the other case.
That you have not, with all due respect, you have not shown anywhere near the kind of outrage. You've said it because
you haven't been listening to me.
Leaves you no choice.
You're not listening to me. You are not listening to me. This man should be alive today. Then listen to me.
The kind of indignity that you ought to have for Eric Garner being killed.
He shouldn't have been killed.
You spent all this time reading about Michael Brown.
Listen to me.
You don't care about the death of Eric Garner.
You know what? You know what?
Not in the way you should.
You know what? You're wrong. And you're wrong on a number of points.
Let me say something else.
No, don't filibuster. No, Tavis. No, you're not going to make that. You're not going to make that allegation on this program without listening to what I have to say. You need to be one other thing. You need to be educated. I say the cops never should have been there. They never should have arrested this guy. They never should have arrested him the first time. And I'm telling you, the greed of government caused the cops to go there because the government wanted their money. I am angry about what happened. So don't put words in my mouth or feelings that I have and put them aside. You need to listen to what really happened.
Let me say one more thing and I'll let you go, my friend.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Number one, this is what I was talking about earlier when I said that too often our white brothers and sisters even unwittingly talk down to black people and come at them with a wrong approach. Three times you're going to tell me that I need to be educated when I know this stuff as well as you do, number one.
I say it to everybody,
Here's my final point. Sean, hear me.
You need to be able to handle a debate, Tavis.
I want to add this.
You need to be able to handle a solid debate. And having debated you a lot over the years, you know me better. To sit there and accuse me of something that's false, and I am not going to let that happen on this program or any other program.
Let me add one last thing that you didn't ask about, but since we're talking about it, let me just add this. Since you referenced President Obama on BET earlier today, with all due respect to our President Barack Obama, black folk don't need lectures on black entertainment television. You go to black entertainment television, Mr. President, respectfully, to lecture black folk, and then you're wrong, respectfully, when you tell them that these things take time. Dr. King, who you have a bust of in the Oval Office, wrote a book called Why We Can't Wait. Stop telling black folk they got to wait and that these things take time. We can't wait, number one. Number two, Mr. President, respectfully, when you say we can't compare what's happening now to what happened 50 years ago, tell that to the parents of these kids who are being gunned down in America's streets. It is open season on black men, and it is in many ways as bad as it was 50 years ago. And finally, here's my point. Why go to BET and give a black folk a lecture, but go to Stephen Colbert and tell jokes? I don't get that.
I have a message for the president. He's a 3-time loser. He's 0 for 3 on high-profile race cases. Wrong on the Cambridge police, wrong on Trayvon Martin. He forgot the evidence in each case. He didn't listen to the evidence. He rushed to judgment.
We disagree on that. We disagree on that.
And wrong on sending 3 White House representatives to the funeral of Michael Brown, who fought for a cop's gun. Who fought for a cop's gun. So I would, and he's also wrong not to confront Joe Biden for saying we'll put you all back in chains. Wrong not to confront Eric Holder to say that we're a nation of cowards on race, because none of that is true.
I will confront the president when I think he's wrong. I will confront the president, respect, protect, correct, When he's wrong, I'll confront him, but we disagree on this, my friend, on those issues.
All right. I still love you, even though you're a pain in my neck.
I love you, too. I still love you.
We started our careers out together, but we disagree a lot. All right. Thank you, Tavis. Coming up next.
I'll get you right. I'll get you right one of these days, Sean.
Will you invite Louis Farrakhan to your conferences? And you didn't invite me. You invite Farrakhan, an anti-Semite and a racist, to your conference. You ought to apologize to America for that.
Good night, Sean.
You ought to apologize right now to America. I'll give you one last chance. Apologize for inviting Farrakhan. Apologize for it.
God bless you.
I love you.
Good night.